What's up, patrons? How you all doing? Hey, here's another exclusive video for you all that's going to be in our series on programming in the C language. Sorry that it took me so long to get some more videos out, but things have been really hectic and I've been barely being able to get the YouTube videos out, so I apologize for that. So here is another exclusive, and we're going to continue on, and hopefully we'll get this finished out for the basics. Now, what we're going to be looking at today is going to be the programming language in C, still with doing functions. This is going to be lesson number 5. If you missed the previous lessons, and just look back through the Patreon feed, you'll see the previous lessons. So by this point, we've done if-thens and loops and variables and all that stuff. So now we're moving on to functions. So types of functions that we can have. Now, functions can be declared kind of like variables can be. They can be integer functions, they can be float functions, and they can also be void functions. And what this all means is it's basically having different data types for functions, and it's based on its return value. If the function will return a value, or if it's void, if it just doesn't return anything. And we'll see that as we get into it. So why not go ahead and kick things off with a simple example of it? So for our simple function, what we're going to do is we're going to just put down a simple function definition. Now, function definitions are going to be similar to like our main function. So the main function is a function, actually. It's just the function that gets executed generally first. Now, there's stuff like prototypes and things like that. We'll get into that later. We'll learn about that later. But for right now, I usually declare them first. I usually declare them right before the main function, just for simplicity's sake, to make sure they get basically processed and loaded into memory first. And then, so far as ours goes, we've got the print output. Just simple. You can name this whatever you want. The beginning, it's kind of like a variable declaration. The beginning, you declare what type it's going to be. So this one is going to be a void type. You can have, like we saw on the previous slide, integer, long, float, double. You can have, whatever kind of data type is going to be returned. Well, this one is just going to print stuff to the screen, so we're just labeling it as void. It has no return. And you'll see what that is once we get into ones that have return values. So don't get worried. So what we want to do is anytime we call this function, and I just name this print output. You could name it anything. You can name it print to screen. You could name it whatever you want to name it. And then with the open and close parentheses, which designates that there are no parameters to pass to it. And we'll talk about what that is here in just a minute, what parameters are. So basically inside here, you write it just like you would write stuff in your main function. So we've got a printf statement, and we've just got some words that we're going to print out with a new line character. And that's pretty much it. You have open and closed curly braces, just like the main function. And then that's pretty much it for the simple declaration. So you have the name of it, what type it is, and then you have basically your code that's in between the curly braces. It's pretty much it. Very simple. Code that you want to execute once you call it. Now down in our main function, we want to call this function. So in order to call it, we literally just type the function name with the open and closed parentheses, because there's nothing to pass to it. And again, we'll talk about that in a minute. And then just a simple semicolon to stop everything. Okay. So when the main function runs, okay, this function will get loaded into memory. Okay. And it will await execution until you call it in the main function. Okay. So in the main function, we do a print output, and then there it is. So let's go see this in action. All right. So I've got let's see, let me move some stuff around. Okay, so what we have here is I've got our lesson 5, and I've got different functions here. So the first one we're going to look at is our simple function. So let me get our simple function out here. So here we go. So there's our printf statement, and then here's where we call it. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and execute this, our simple function exe. And if I hit enter and execute it, there we go. So here is the output of it calling that function. Okay, fairly simple, fairly straightforward. So this would be easy to do if you're just wanting to maybe print a formatted table or something like that to the screen, and you just want to, or maybe you have like maybe a new line thing that maybe you want to print like a ring of stars, or like a line of stars or something. You could call a function that prints those stars out every single time. Now, yes, you could call the printf the printf function because that's literally what it's for. But I'm just illustrating this is how we call a function. So let's go dive in a little bit deeper, shall we? And let's grab a little more complicated one. So I'm going to go over to a return type now. So remember I talked about that you have the different types and what they'll return. That's this return type. So looking at this, we got pretty much the same thing going on. But let's say you want that function to spit out a value. So the function's going to run, do some math, maybe churn some data, and then it's going to spit out a result. Okay, so in this case we have one that I just named return type. I declared it as an integer type, so it's only going to return integer values, so it won't be able to do decimals just yet unless you declared it as double or float or something like that. So what we're doing is we're declaring a variable a, initializing it to 0, and then what we're doing is we're adding 5 plus 10 and storing that in a. Okay, and then after this code is executed and done, then we're going to return the value of a, which means whenever this function is called, it's going to give you the value of a, whatever that may be. Okay, so down in our main function, let's go ahead and let's look at this. So I'm going to declare an integer variable called num, just so we have a place to store information, and I'm going to do a printf, and then give it, this is the number we got, whatever, and then the %d, and then what we're going to do is we're going to set num. Okay, we're going to send num. It's what we're going to do in this print statement. But before that, we have num equals, and then we're going to call the return type. And the reason you can set num equal to this is because since this has a return, it will return whatever value comes out of this, so that a variable, the result of that a variable, will be set in the num variable since it's calling that function. Does that make sense? So you could also change this around a little bit and replace num and not even have to create a variable. You could just do a printf and then put in and just call the function call right here. Now you have to make sure that you do the %d or %f depending on whether it's a float or an integer or whatever. You still have to get your data types right because we have an integer function, so we're using the integer data type basically reference here. So you have to make sure that you do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and see how this looks. So I'm going to go ahead and jump over here. Go ahead and clear this out just so it makes more sense. Let me get our return type. Okay, and so here's our return type. So we've got our numbers. We've got our 5 plus 10, okay, and then we've got our return of that num. Now I think I called it rnum here in this example, and then instead of a, and then there we are doing our return type and calling it and returning it. Okay, so that's basically the same code. So let's go ahead and run it. So return type exe. So we run it, and there we go. We get the 15, so which is the 5 plus 10. So it executed, it stored it in another variable, and then we printed that variable out. Okay, so that's basically a simple return type. So whatever type it is, you can do some math or do something, and you could even declare it as a char and return a character if you wanted to. So if you wanted, I don't know, maybe something to return some sort of alphanumeric number or something like that, you could return a character. Okay, whatever you want to return, but you can basically have it do some processing in that function and then return a value. Maybe it's just a true or a false. Maybe it's a 0 or 1. Maybe it's Boolean. You could declare it as Boolean if you wanted to where it's true or false. However you want to do it. Depends on what you're wanting to use it for. Okay, so let's go back to our slide and let's dig in a little bit deeper, shall we? So let's look at passing variables. Yes, you can actually send variables to a function for processing. So let's say that you have, you're asking the user to enter something like we have here in this example. Okay, so we're going to take in somebody's date of birth or year that they were born in, and then we're going to say how old they are based on this year's date. And as I'm filming this is 2019. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a function. We're going to declare it as integer because we're going to return something. Now I just named it your_age. It's fine. But then you just declare variables inside the parentheses. Okay. So in this case, we declared one variable. Now, if you needed multiple variables, you just put a comma after it. So like if you wanted another variable, maybe you wanted the month, you put a comma after this year born, a space, and then declare another variable like int your underscore month or something like that. You know, you can do as many variables as you want in here. Okay. So right now it's just taking a single variable. You're born is going to be the name of that variable. Now that variable is a local variable, meaning that variable can only be used within this function. You can't call this year born variable down here in the main function because this is a part of this one. Okay, so you can't, variables can't cross over. Okay, if you declare them locally. Now declare them globally, whole another story. But if you declare them locally, like this one is, whether it's in the parameters of the function, you know, which that's what this is called, inside the parentheses is called the parameters. Okay, so if it's inside the parameters, then that's a part of that function. Okay, so makes sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to declare a your age equals 0 integer variable just to initialize it to 0. Then what we're going to do to calculate the age is we're going to take whatever is in this variable and subtract it from 2019. So we're taking 2019 minus your year born. Okay, so whatever number we pass up in here will filter through to this spot right here, and it will be subtracted from 2019 and stored in the variable your age. Okay, and then after this is all over with, then we're going to return the value your age. Okay, so down here is when we call it. So back in our main function, we're going to declare a variable called birth year, and we're going to initialize it to 1975, let's say. Then we're going to declare a variable called num and just initialize that to 0. This will store the resultant birthday. Okay, so down here we're going to say num is equal to, and then we call our function your age. Okay, and then we insert this birth year. Now you could use this as a variable, or you could just type the number in if you wanted to. I went ahead and set the year to a variable and did it that way, because that way if for some reason I want to change, it's a good habit to get into, not doing what we call magic numbers, where you just have these hard set numbers all throughout your code, because it makes it very difficult if you ever have to come back and change those numbers. Okay, so if you have to change the numbers, if they're all up here in variables, let's say, and they're all up top and declared, you can change, you can update those different numbers very easily, and then you don't have to go hunt through all the code trying to find all the different instances of that number and update it. So it's easy to get into the habit of setting them to a variable and then calling that variable later on. Just a hint, just FYI of good programming etiquette. So anyway, put in that 1957, so then that goes in here. So then it should run 1975, take that from 2019, return that, it'll get stored in num, and then we print it to the screen. All right, so let's see how that works. All right, let me do something first. Okay, let's see how that works. So now I've got the passing var dot c. Okay, so here's your age. So you got your age equals 0. So here's the same code. Okay. And so we're going to go ahead, and I've already compiled it, so we'll go ahead and run it. So .exe, and here we go. So if you're 1975, let's just do some calculator checking. So if you're 2019, whoops, helps if I press numlock. 2019 minus 1975. You should be 44 years old, okay? So let's go ahead and see if it gets it right. And there we are, 44 years. Your age is 44. So perfectamundo, all right? So that's how we pass numbers or variables, basically. Pretty much anything. You could even declare chars in here and pass characters if for some reason you needed to pass characters to this, okay? So that's basically how we pass variables. So now I got one more spot, passing multiple variables. Remember me telling you that you have different parameters? Okay, so this example is going to have 2 different parameters in it, okay? So we've got our double, because this one's going to have fractional pieces, or it possibly could have fractional pieces, calculating the area of a square, basically. So we've got area calc, just named it arbitrarily, and then I've got double length, comma, double width. So I've got 2 variables that are what? Local variables, okay, that are local to only this function. of length and width. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a variable called area, going to assign that to 0, and then I'm going to say area is equal to the length variable that we get up here, whatever we pass to it, times the width variable, whatever we pass in that parameter. And then we'll return this area variable. Okay. Now down in our main function, what we're going to do is we're going to declare a num variable equal to 0, so that way we can catch the return. Okay, and we're going to say numVary is equal to area calc, and then we'll do 10 comma 15 for our 10 length and our 5 width. I said 15, 10 and 5. Sorry, my bad. So 10 comma 5, and that's how we pass. So 10 will go into length, and 5 will go into width. It all corresponds, okay? And then, of course, when we're done, excuse me, we're going to write it out with a 0.2f, percent 0.2f. What that means is with 2 places after the decimal on a float value. And then, of course, we'll pass it that float, that num, okay? Is what we're going to do. So let's go see it in action. So here we go. So I'm going to show you the code first, passing multivar, well, it helps if I can type. Sorry, I got to look at 2 different places. Here we go. Okay, so there we go. So there's our calc where we got length and width. There's the doubles, okay? And then there we are. So now I've already compiled that. So we're going to do the passing multivar. Now, 10 times 5 should be 50, right? So, and with 2 decimal places after it, it should be 50.00. So let's see what we get. And there we are, 50.00. All right. So that's basically passing multiple variables. Okay. So guys, I know this one was kind of a short, quick one, but I just wanted to show you guys and give you a quick rundown of functions. You have any questions on any of this stuff, be sure to just ask me. Just feel free to either ask me on Twitter or Facebook or right here on Patreon. You know, just whichever. Just give me a holler and let me know if you're having any trouble with whatever, and I'll do my best to help you troubleshoot it. Guys, thank you so much for being my patrons. I really enjoy talking to you and being able to give you guys exclusive content like this, especially stuff that really gets into the nitty-gritty. I also thank you very much for the support because it helps the channel a lot, and I'm able to bring you guys all kinds of really cool stuff. In fact, I've got some really neat YouTube videos that will be coming up soon. I think I've got some giveaways planned. I think my next one will probably be just a Patreon exclusive giveaway. And I think what I'll do is here at first, since my Patreons are fairly low numbers, my patrons, I think I'll just give everybody a giveaway item. How's that? Does that sound cool? So everybody will get to be in there, and then we'll compete against each other if we get, you know, quite a bit of people on Patreon. So any case, so look forward to that. There's going to be some giveaways coming, and I know for a fact they will because I've been talking to different supporting people, and they'll be willing to give us some stuff. That way I can, funnel it down to you guys, and you guys can enjoy some of the benefits as well. So thank you again so much for your support, and I will see you next time.